Is emerging on the face of the earth a new human, an infinite human, and that infinite human is you. Join Elizabeth Monroy weekly for enlightening discussions, multidimensional journeys, profound meditations, and empowering visualizations as we co-create the new consciousness renaissance together with other blossoming infinite human beings who are shifting the old paradigms of our broken, fragmented, finite 3D Earth and alchemizing it into a more expansive, unified, loving, infinite reality by reclaiming their true divine infinite power within as the co-creators of the new infinite Earth. Join us weekly for the Infinite Human Talk Show, hosted by Elizabeth Monroy, every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time.
And hello, my divine, infinite human beings. You're all that is, ever has been, and ever shall be. And welcome to the Infinite Human Talk Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Monroy, and I'm so thrilled to be here and to be talking to an amazing, young, beautiful, very intuitively gifted, and a real devout student and teacher of Keylonic Science, Oliwia from Poland. I'm going to bring her on in just a minute and get her to pronounce her last name for me. But she's been on the show before. She's amazing. Many of you know her. And we're going to be talking about the roots. We're going to be talking about something that no one is talking about because this information is intuitive. She downloaded it and it sparked my memories. And so the whole purpose is to spark your memories for us to remember our future. And we're going to the roots of Tartaria from the first seeding, of the divine angelic beings. And we're going to go to where it shifted tracks onto the false timeline. And why am I talking about this? Why am I so passionate about something? Sometimes I don't even know why. I just follow my intuition, and I've been just consumed with Tartaria, but I've looked around. Usually I first get the information and I look around. I'm not the only one. There's so many people who are talking about it, or perhaps they've been talking about it forever, but I just haven't been aware of it. And maybe you're just becoming aware of it. But I think a lot of us, the collective, I would say the blossoming infinite human beings who came here to be the change, to remember the future, to get us back on track on the correct organic timelines. We're remembering that. And today is such a powerful, powerful day because we just finished this whole Easter portal and we really resurrected, I'd say, not just the Christ within us, but we rebirth. Someone said we rebirthed Eartha. Eartha is the highest emanation, the highest essence of our planet Earth. It's the part of us in the highest dimensions that has not fallen. And we are now alchemizing, synthesizing, we are merging, we are creating heaven on earth, and we are creating earth and heaven, and we are becoming one. So I just felt a huge shift where we really stepped much more firmly into the divine blueprint of our true earth, our true earth's divine blueprint. And as we do that, many of you individually are shifting and you're feeling these frequencies. I know you are, and they're just incredible. They're off the charts. I'm feeling them, and Kiki's feeling them. We're just been zonked out. And what it's doing, of course, is purging the lower frequencies. And as you do your inner work of letting go of the hurt, the shame, the guilt, the fear, you are embodying more and more of the higher frequencies. And as you do that, I wore a veil today, you pierce the veil. You pierce the veil. This is a net of a veil that has been encapsulated us. I think this is so powerful here. It's kept us in this false reality where we can't see. The veil. I just wore a veil today. The brides wear the veils and everything, but it's kept us locked in an artificial time loop, not able to see the truth in plain sight. And for me, when Tartaria was brought up by E.M. Parks a little over a year ago on April Fool's Day last year, at first I was like, what? Yeah, Tartaria. And now I'm seeing so clearly. And so a lot of people say, well, how do we know what truth is? How do we know we're evolving? How do we know we're ascending? Well, you're starting to see through all the BS, the artificial, and that's why they're shoving AI down our throats now. And that's why I and many people are being guided to really step up fast. We're being ascended really fast. We're being, our frequency is being raised with all this massive solar flares, with all the photonic belt activation, plasma, rainbow, crystal codes coming in, pouring in through our sun, through the Nomi seeds. So much is happening, and it's happening really fast too. So we don't redo again, this artificial time loop that they're trying to put us in of artificial technology. And that's why I'm just passionate about exposing, talking about, just being with, and I'm traveling to all these sites, to be with this technology, these ancient buildings, because they're so amazing. And as you are more and more opening up and aware of it, and letting that come in, what you're doing is you're letting in the true organic timelines. You're correcting your history, and you are getting aligned with the consciousness of the Crystalla spiral of life. And that is the key thing to do right now. That is what we're here for. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring Oliwia on, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about her, and then she can take it away. Hello,
Hello,
Olivia. So
hello everyone. Hello, Elizabeth. It's so lovely to be here. I think it's been almost a year.
yep.
Where do I start? It seems like we are both kind of picking up on that frequency of these veils because I have one myself.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself in more detail, and what's been going on. Also in a year, you've done so
So,
much. So
where do I start? About, I guess, a lot of people know me already, but about 5 years ago, I have experienced the awakening of my third eye, which allowed me to see other multidimensional realities. And this is pretty much where my journey has started, where I started to learn more about myself, first of all, and also about the reality around me. And I think that the best way to discover the massive timelines that we want to talk about today, the massive timelines that have been erased from our history, like Tartaria or Hyperborea, or even a certain place that I don't think anyone has been mentioning that, but there's also the Kingdom of Polaris. But I will get to that.
okay,
So
wonderful.
I have been picking up on these timelines myself for a while. I've been having those very interesting experiences of finding myself like in a cities where like every single building was white, and it was like full of this Tartarian structure of domes and those circle windows, and it was all very very interesting. And I once had that experience of seeing like a flower of life, but like this true flower of life, the one that is based on the crystic spiral. I saw it inside of a
I love
church.
this.
Like, right now when we have all those
Mhm.
paintings of like the, different saints and whatever the church has chosen. I was actually seeing that. And then I was seeing almost like a configuration of like a lotus, the lotuses that we have in our plasma body anatomy, the ones that have like the 12 petals. And it was like a golden lotus that was shining in the middle of like a glass window inside of a church that was based on that Tartarian
Hmm.
architecture. So that kind of led me to further research on certain missing timelines in history. So this was like a part of my personal discoveries, if we are supposed to talk directly about Tartaria. And that led me to a question, why nobody is actually remembering those missing timelines. I mean, right now this is coming to a collective memory, but why was all of this gone for so long? And that
Mhm.
also helped me kind of develop certain methods throughout which we can all find our own path towards remembrance, as I refer to it. So I'm teaching about Tartaria on my personal classes called Plasma Regenesis, throughout which you're not only supposed to learn about Tartaria, but also you're supposed to learn how to reawaken your own memories that are within you. Because all the knowledge, it's not on the outside of us, it's on the inside of us. It's encrypted within our DNA and reflected throughout our cellular memory. A part of why all these memories about Tartaria, Hyperborea, and other timelines have been missing is because of something referred to as the blank slate technology, which is literally inserted into different aspects of our DNA, and it's basically erasing our memories. So what I have been working on very intensely throughout last year especially is basically clearing that technology so that each one of us could learn how to do it ourselves and progressively retrieve those memories, whether that's Hyperborea, maybe certain missing parts of Atlantis. Because from my insights, the timeline of Atlantis is 75% blank slated. So that means that we remember like the crystal temples, we remember certain aspects of it, but very often we fall into this New Age Atlantis timeline, which is like a phantom Atlantean insertion. So when we look into those timelines, we also discover that, yes, we know that a certain kingdom existed, but do we actually know its full history? So these are very, very interesting things to discover, and hopefully I will be able to share some of these insights today.
Wow, thank you. That sounds wonderful. Now, this is a two-part for those who are tuning in. So the second part will be aired next week, but right now we're going to just take it, I guess, from the beginning, and then next week we'll talk a little bit about remembering this back into existence. So, and this is why you're here. This is what you help people do, because as a collective, we remember we are choosing the correct and correcting the timelines, as I said before. So, take it away. I know you have kind of a presentation plan, so and
Yeah,
if you
so
could describe the slides for the
I think we can start with the
listeners.
slides, yes, because they will kind of allow us to, like, put it together. So
Okay, and
actually,
just be sure you just describe them really well for our listeners.
yes, that's the goal. So when I started looking into Tartaria, I actually discovered that there's been one more kingdom that was actually first, a kingdom that set the foundation for the existence of Great Tartaria. And something to be aware of here is that Great Tartaria actually encompassed the entire planet. There was no division into like USA, Russia, different countries of Africa. The entire planet was known as the Great Tartarian Kingdom. And the races that actually started, the entire, let's say, kingdom of Great Tartaria, they actually started off in the North Pole, and they are referred to as the Hyperboreans. And a part of the history of Hyperboreans can be found in the Slavic Vedas, because usually we know everything about the Vedas that come from India, but actually the Slavic Vedas are even older, and they carry some truths. I personally do not agree with everything that is said there, but it carries a part of that ancient wisdom that has been passed on from one generation to the other. So when we talk about the different seedings of the angelic human race, I will try not to talk about it too much in detail, but something to be aware of here is that we had 3 seedings of the angelic human race, and the first 2 seedings, from my insights, were based on that Turanisium genome from Tara, the aspect of our planet in dimension 5. However, that has been a subject to change when it comes to seeding 3, considering that there has been a lot of different alignments with the domains of eternal creation, referred to as the Jura Lake Conservatory, and also because of the fact that certain guardian races knew that the stellar activation cycle is coming. They knew that the angelic human genome needs to be upgraded in a way, and that evolution needs to take a different tour than the last time. So when the first seeding was created, it started off with a very high genetic potential of 48 DNA strands, with an access to so-called eternal urea body. And those races started off on the North Pole. And the North Pole is basically the location of the Hyperborean kingdom. And this place also is known as Daria. So Daria is on the North Pole, and this is also like you can find this name in the Slavic Vedas. But at the same
Okay,
time,
and I'm gonna stop you just for a quick commercial break. We have three of them. So, and when we come back, that's fascinating. So, really, Tartaria started in the North Pole. So, okay, we'll be
in the
right
South
back to
Pole.
discuss that further.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
And welcome back. Welcome back to the Infinite Human Talk Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Monroy, and I'm with Oliwia Ezayana from
That's right.
Poland. And we're talking about the roots of Tartaria, the origins. I mean, so many people are like, wow, how old are these buildings? Where did they come from? Where did this technology come from? And Olivia's just telling us, it was the first seeding, and it was all over the planet. It was a planet Tartaria. It wasn't just Russia, or just, there are maps that we'll talk about later that exist, but when it was the whole planet was Tartaria, culture, and then it began. And you were talking about the North Pole is the beginnings of Hyperborea, right? So,
Hyperborea. Yes, so we had the kingdom of Hyperborea, or Daria, if that's easier to pronounce as well. Daria was on the
okay.
North Pole, and then on the South Pole we had the same type of a kingdom, but it was referred to as the kingdom of Polaris. And those two races from different sides of the world were actually connected with each other through a certain chamber that I will show in the later images, not now. And basically, the mission of those two kingdoms was to bring in the souls that were supposed to, create the Great Tartaria. Because it works this way, that on the South Pole, there is a portal through which the souls are incarnating into planet Earth. And on the North Pole, they are ascending out of the planet. These portals were closed a while ago, like a long, long time ago, because of the attempts to hijack the North and the South Pole. I mean, you will not get there normally right now. You would need all sorts of permissions to visit the North Pole or the South Pole physically. But they are being opened again, which is great news.
Can I just interrupt? One question.
Yes.
Sorry to disturb you, but now haven't the poles been, flipped several times? I was understanding that actually the North Pole is the South Pole and the South Pole is the North Pole
Yes,
now.
and now it's the opposite.
Okay.
Now it's the opposite, so technically you should be ascending through the South Pole. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy to think this way, but right now, actually, the
Yeah.
souls are coming through the North Pole. So we will actually have a lot of indigo children will be, for example, birthed in Siberia or northern Canada or Greenland,
Hmm.
because of that change in the in the poles, which I guess kind of proves us why certain forces right now want to get to Greenland, for example, why there's so much
Yes.
interest in this part of the world. That's because there's a very important Stargate in Greenland that literally connects us to the Tartarian timeline.
Yes, that's fascinating. I really want you to talk more about that. That explains Trump's move towards
Yes.
Greenland, very much so. Yes.
Anyway, let's continue and look at this at the slide here. So when we and there was one more kingdom that was running simultaneously as well, and it was the kingdom in the Himalayan mountains. It had a certain energetic significance because it was main energy distribution center when it comes to the ether on the planet, but I will talk about it later. So Great
Oh,
Tartaria started off 800,000 years ago, um, and it lasted for a long time. It was actually referred to as the golden age of humanity because of the fact that all the nations were one. We had an access to the technologies that right now we can only dream of. I will elaborate on those technologies a little bit later. And basically, the reason why the Great Tartarian Kingdom was destroyed to begin with is because of the wars with Atlantis. Because what started to happen at some point when we started interbreeding with other races that started to come here and they had their own agendas, and so certain parts of Great Tartaria started to claim their own sovereignty, and one of them was Atlantis. And Atlantis was very quickly overtaken by dark magicians that were connected to the Black Dragon forces. And their main goal was basically to destroy the unity on the planet. And of course, for that, the Great Tartarian Kingdom had to fall. So there was this king in Atlantis known as King Atlas, that basically use the energies from the crystal generator temples in order to directly attack the Great Tartarian Empire. And since they were supported by other interstellar races to begin with, such as Draconians at that time, they were very much supporting Atlantis because of their um, underground structures that they had there and the experiments they were doing on other human beings. Uh, it basically came to the point where Tartaria was a very peaceful empire, so they didn't have as many weapons as Atlantis, and of course that led to its fall. And the reason why right now we are calling like a book with maps an atlas is because King Atlas was literally the one that wanted to overtake the entire world and put it under the dominance of Atlantis. So that's really the origin of that name.
makes sense.
Yes, luckily, Middle Tartaria, not the Great Tartaria anymore, but the second Tartaria that was rebirthed a bit later after the fall of Atlantis. So I would say the karma returned to them at some point.
Can, can,
It,
can I just ask you one question there? Because we know Tara, before it was pulled through the black hole, there was the Elena and Mu, that were then Atlantis. We kind of repeated the time loop of Atlantis and Lemuria. So, are you talking about after it's already been pulled through the black hole and it was the
this is all the
fragment of?
third seeding. If we look at the dates, this is all the third seeding.
Okay, so
Um,
this would be really Atlania then, right? It would be the first Atlantis that before when the
yes,
halls of Amente were put in and when it was pulled through the black hole and it was scattered to
okay, so
become
this
our
was
solar
happening
system.
already on Earth. From my insights, this was 900,000 years ago when Tara fell like 550 million years ago. So this is actually something that was rebirthed very,
200.
very recently, if we look at it this way. The problem with Tara is like a story for another show, I would say, where
Yes. No, but I'm
actually,
just trying to get, so this is after it's been pulled through the black hole and this is the fragment
yes,
that we're
yes, yes,
living
yes.
on
And
now.
after the
Okay,
plasma
gotcha.
wars of Seeding 1, this is all the story of Seeding 3.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
So I suppose we can proceed to the next slide. Thank you. So, Middle Tartaria was rebirthed 8,500 years ago, and it wasn't that big anymore. It was mainly Russia, the post-Soviet countries like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and it also included the Balkan countries, Spain, and France. So it was almost like a unified federation of different kingdoms. But there were two main rivals of Middle Tartaria: China and Roman Empire. And what happened here, and this is the interesting story with the Chinese Wall, with the Great Wall of China, that actually it was built by the Tartarian race in order to prevent the Chinese to come into Middle Tartarian Empire. Why is that? Because
Yes.
they were actually hybridized with reptilian races. So there is this movie. I'm not sure if I got the name right, but it's called The Great Wall, in where like they are basically using that Great Wall to defend from like those massive reptilian beings that are attacking the empire. So this was working on the same principle. They built that massive wall in order to separate themselves, because something about Tartaria, and I would say this is the same thing with Russia nowadays, that they are always protecting their own people. They are always looking after their own people, and they wanted to make sure that their bloodline will not be affected. So this is basically those wars with China had a very important impact because they weakened the Middle Tartarian Empire, while the Roman Empire was growing in power. And the Roman Empire was basically ruled by those that were in charge of Atlantis before. The same group and the same souls, just in different bodies. And what eventually happened is that those countries got into a war, and that led to use of the nuclear weapons. And something that has been noted in the Middle Ages, the Black Death pandemic, is actually a radiation sickness that was a result of the use of the nuclear weapons on humanity at that time. And there's many of us that are also holding certain genetic vulnerability to all sorts of diseases because of the trauma from the Black Death, from the plague. So all these diseases also that we have gone through in other incarnations, they are also having an impact on like whether you will get sick for a certain disease that they might try to bring in right now. So a part of that healing that we are going through when we remember ourselves is also making sure that we heal those aspects that were affected in the past.
Okay, and so she's referring to the plagues that that Europe, in Florence alone, I think they lost like 90% of the population during,
Yes.
and they said it was caused by rats and everything. But you're saying actually, of course, it was caused by the
The
radiation fallout
symptoms
from
were
all
very
this.
similar to radiation sickness. So
Hmm.
this is something that really wiped out humanity, and that is still within our genome. And this basically, for example, like we wonder why
Fascinating.
people in the Middle Ages were much smaller than we are right now. That's because we needed literally a few centuries to heal from what happened at that time. So this was also like a big agenda against the human race, and of course that conflict led to the fall of Middle Tartaria.
Okay. Fascinating.
So I think we have a commercial break in a moment.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, we'll be right back to find out what happens next in our false true history melding line timelines.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting, visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back to the Infinite Human Talk Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Monroy, and we're speaking with Oliwia from Poland, who's just fascinating, intuitive, deep, very perceptive history of our planet and of the roots of Tartaria. So take it away, Oliwia. I can't wait to hear what's
so
next.
if we could get back to that image I was sharing. That one with the timeline of the events.
Okay, Caleb might be we're on another show right now.
No worries.
Okay.
Anyway, we were talking about how Middle Tartaria fell, and then it was once again rebirthed during the times of the Renaissance. So that's when, like, we learn in history about like Da Vinci and all those fascinating people of the Renaissance that bring this knowledge pretty much out of nowhere. Suddenly we start to cherish the human being and how talented it in here it is, how talented it is in all sorts of arts. And the Renaissance is almost like the rebirth of Tartaria. And at that time, Tartaria is basically what we can see on some of the maps. So that means that we have this Mongolian part of Tartaria, we have the Moscovian Tartaria, and it is mainly Russia and the neighboring countries. But Tartaria has a plan to grow stronger and to grow bigger. And that is through basically sharing those technologies with other countries. Because once again, we had the rebirth of all these cathedrals. They were renewed, they looked beautiful and amazing. And basically, small Tartaria once again started to bring in and introduce the technologies that were known during the times of Great Tartaria. This is thanks to the birth of the souls that actually remembered Great Tartaria to begin with. Some of those artists and musicians as well that brought the Christic music scale at that time again. For example, Bach was carrying almost like this Christic music symphony from Great Tartaria back again to our contemporary planetary timeline. All of them were assisting with bringing those advanced technologies in. And it was like, as I said, the rebirth of this entire ancient kingdom. What unfortunately was taking place is that as much as the Great and the Middle Tartaria cared about humanity and equal rights, this wasn't exactly the case during the times of the Small Tartaria. The society...
Okay, I want to interrupt you just for a second, if you don't mind, because this is one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, and it'll lead into what you're talking about. But there was obviously definitely the FA, the fallen angelics, the parasites, who were always putting their hands in hijacking it, obviously, and I really want to just talk about the Renaissance because, such an incredible time, yet so hijacked. And I have pretty much full memory of my lifetime there. And I've been living in Florence probably on and off for, since the 80s. I spent, like 30 years there, and that's where I had my New Renaissance Florence International Film School, which was a bad word when you came there. You didn't say New Renaissance, but I remember my life, and I was actually Marcello Ficino, which was kind of weird. I was like, I don't know, it couldn't be me, but I had much confirmation. And what happened then was so much was coming, forth, as you said, with Michelangelo, Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, the Platonic school. But Toth got in there, and Toth, that's when he
Yes.
hijacked the sacred geometry into the Fibonacci spiral and and all the flower of life. He got everything off track. He used it, got in there, and then a lot of those buildings, they say they were built, by these people, or the art was built by them. But if you really look into the whole studio practice, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, they all studied under people, and they were copies. They were copiers. So much of that, I believe almost all of it, even like the David and all this, were simply ancient Tartarian art, and the cathedrals that they
Yes.
cleaned up, they polished. Yeah. So they were
So
bringing it
yeah, that's
back.
why I was saying the buildings were being renewed.
Okay.
I mean, they
Yeah,
existed
exactly.
before.
Yeah.
They existed before. They
Yes.
just, maybe they painted them into a nice color, all sorts of stuff, but there was never a chance that they would be able to build something like this. So the problem is, what was the source of these technologies coming through? There was this good aspect where the incarnation of so-called deity souls that incarnated on Tartaria
Mhm.
before, they had that memory and they had that knowledge. But then we have that other wave of souls that remembered Atlantis. And they basically wanted to introduce a high class society in which only a small group of people has an access to the free energy. And then the other group would still live in the conditions of the Middle Ages.
And
With
before we get into the class difference, I want to say something really important that happened, because I actually was the one that translated that, thinking I was doing something wonderful for humanity. But that was when Toth stole the Emerald records, and they were found by the Medici family in Egypt, and they were brought forth as Toast's emerald tablets, not the emerald records. And that's when he took us further off the timeline. And,
yes,
which also, of course, led to the class, just the lower class rebelling against the upper class and tearing down all the Tartarian nobility. So
yes,
go ahead with that. Yeah.
yes, I do remember myself. I had a lifetime. Actually, it was also in Florence and in the areas of Tuscany. And there was a point where I had to escape. And I do remember, like I told you in the beginning, I had a vision of that, like a plasma flower on the windows of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a vision of that flower turning black. And that's when I understood that there was a moment when Tartaria literally dark flowered. When those
Dark
technologies
flower.
that,
Yes.
yeah, where those technologies
Yes.
started to be used against us. So I
Wow.
remember myself kind of escaping to the Eastern Europe. And that was actually, I remember myself like wearing like a dress and kind of like, hiding it.
Yeah.
Because it would look as if I was of some kind of royal lineage. And I had a vision of myself. I was walking through the same street in this lifetime, and that was actually in Belarus, which was also a part of Tartaria for all the 3 periods of Tartaria. And it was almost like a safe place in which I managed to keep myself safe in that lifetime. But all
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
areas that we can see these days, like in Italy, all this Tartarian architecture, it has been used against us. Because what happened when it comes to small Tartaria is that basically the rebirth of the free energy technologies and the fact that the access to them was so limited, people started rebelling against all those monarchs, oligarchs that basically took all those gifts of the free energy for themselves. And that's basically what the French Revolution was about. It was about destroying that order in which only monarchy had the actual access to the free energy and to all the gifts that come along with it.
Well, yes. Can I just interject?
Go
Because
ahead.
what that stirred up in me was
Yes.
and I'm starting to realize that there was all these kingdoms. I mean, the kingdoms of Sicily, Italy was all kingdoms. The Tsar, of course, and I just was watching. The Austrian kingdom. Now, of course, it was blended with a lot of the Anunnaki. So there was fallen angelics in there, but I believe there was still bloodlines of the true Magi Griot lines in the Tartarian kingdom. Some of them, which is why we saw all this kingdom against kingdom, and which is why we saw like the Tsar and in the French Revolution, and all the revolutions were incited by the poor people to pull down these remnants of the Tartarians. That yes, they lived in the palaces, yes, but whatever, I do believe they were still trying to take care, of their community to the best within terrible circumstances. What say you?
Yeah, there were attempts like this, yes. For example, there was one attempt like this in France, and there was even like an attempt to basically like make sure that basically the right heir is going to sit on the throne, and he will start to kind of bring certain changes. The same attempt was in Russia. Unfortunately, both of them were failed. Because if we look at it this way, we have those 13 Atlantean bloodlines that spread throughout Europe, and it's kind of like they started infiltrating all those kingdoms from the very core. So whenever we tried to make things different, unfortunately, they would come in and they would try, and again, through this dark magic and all their satanic rituals, people have been connected to the frequency fence for over 25,000 years. So that means that it's as if, like, right now we pay
Yeah.
taxes, take out the energy. But
Yes, but and back to that, because I'm fascinated by European history, and you don't learn it correctly, But what we're saying is we're stirring up some things here, because I'm realizing, and a lot of people think, oh, the royals, they're all shape shifting reptilians, but there were some of the true Magi Grail lines still in power for a while, but through the false lines of the Magdalena, who was usurped by the false Christ, the nine, they gave birth to the Meravillian, these 13 Illuminati tribes that usurped the true kings and queens that were
from my
here. So that's
perspective,
what.
it was a little bit different. From my perspective, this was not the Christ period. They came already before from Atlantis.
Yes, well,
What
the Atlantean kings too, but I'm just saying that was weaved into it. That was something that was used as the divine right that we see in the Da Vinci Code to kind of, oh, we're of the Magi Grail line, but they're the false Magi Grail line that's
Yes.
continued into modern times. That's yeah, but I agree with you with the Atlantean kings that were that was going on under
Yeah.
handedly. So yeah, so the populace was hungry and without free energy anymore, and getting stirred up, by the false Anunnaki Jehovian factions, and they did the dirty work of taking them out, right?
Precisely. So what happened here is that the aristocrats decided to just use that free energy against people, and unfortunately they didn't have enough experience in it yet, and they led to another global reset. I would say that to a certain extent it has been planned. There are certain groups on this planet that are professionals in performing such resets. They just, they collect all the books from the libraries, they print the new ones, they set that whole foundation, and then they perform the actual reset. So this is what happened here. And the later holographic wars, which is the First and Second World War, they were basically used as tools in order to once again remove any kind of further proof of any kind of Tartarian technologies. And right now we just think that the buildings that we are seeing on the planet are decorations, which I think is really, really sad.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about that, about what they did to our buildings, these amazing buildings, So we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery, or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
And welcome back to the Infinite Human Talk Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Monroy. We're having a fascinating discussion with Oliwia from Poland, who just summed up, the roots of Tartaria. And we went through the whole hijacked FOST timelines. And we're going to take just a few minutes to talk about the tragedy of what has happened to these magnificent buildings. And then Olivia's going to kind of explain to us how this technology worked. And then, so I just want to say that I was amazed because I love Europe and I love being around these buildings. That's why I live here, and I just, every day I go visit a cathedral or, it's all around me, and it's just so beautiful and it's so healing. Even though it is unplugged, you still feel the resonance of the dome chambers. But when I went to the States, I always hated being in America, my home, because it was so ugly. It was all just boxes and cubes and, like shopping malls and square houses and stuff. But, I went to a place that had been restored that was second largest dome in the world, and the energy was off the charts there. And, people are beginning to realize that some of them were left. Of course, so much was destroyed under the hoax of the World Fairs, where they said they were made of plaster and they put them up and then they destroyed them right before people's eyes. But there are still buildings that remain. So maybe you want to talk about what these buildings would be like if they were plugged in and functioning, and, the technology that they use.
So this certain system of the free energy is actually referred to as the Yukata free energy grid. And it's based on, there are basically two main sources of this energy. It is like you have the underground crystals, usually underneath those cathedrals and temples and, churches, whatever you want to call it. And those underground crystals are picking up the organic energies coming from the planetary core. And then, they distribute them all the way up through the cathedral. And the second part of it is like when we have all these antennas on the tops of like the towers and church, the Tartarian style.
Crosses. They think they're crosses, yes. Yeah, but they're...
Well, crosses, some of them have been replaced. Some of, like, just like with the bells on different like clock towers. They just don't carry the same frequency because they have been replaced. So that's why some of the bells that are on the Tartarian buildings don't correspond to the Christic music scale, because they just replace them on purpose. So that's kind of the same thing with some of the crosses. But anyway, they were basically those crosses or like different antennas on top of the buildings. They were picking up the ether force, which is almost like you can imagine like if you have the particles of air. In between these particles, you have the ether. and that ether can be transformed into electric energy or whatever else you would like it to be. So basically, we had those broadcasting stations all over the planet, the stations that were naturally picking up this energy from the environment. And this was unlimited energy because at that time the planet was perfectly aligned with its source point. So we can see that, for example, like where you live in Italy, the specific architecture of those buildings, that wherever you will go in a certain city, and I was testing that, you will always reach the center, the city center,
Yes.
in which you will come across a church, a cathedral, or some kind of monument that is designed in a Tartarian style. And those buildings from Tartaria, from my perspective, they refer to the configuration of the Holy Trinity, where you have the female architecture, where you have, the arched doorways, the circular windows. All of them actually are reflecting the womb.
And they're magnetic. And they're
yes,
magnetic.
they are magnetic, yes. You almost have that feeling as if you pass through a portal when you reach that building. And then you have all of those like antennas, pillars, columns. These are the male transmitting.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Electrical.
Yes, and the third aspect is the spirit, the harmonizing, amplifying aspect, which is the dome. The dome.
Which is the source.
Yes, the source. You can call it spirit source, whatever you want it to be. But
yes.
It was like this third element. So it's basically free of that yin-yang overlay where, you have the masculine, feminine, which are trapped within each other.
Yes, the part of K, part of Chi, part of Cum trinity of creation.
Precisely, yes.
Stepping down, emanating. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
So this is basically that main configuration. And then those cathedrals were so powerful that they were distributing that energy through the entirety of the city.
Wow. So the cathedral held all those. The dome was source, the rosette windows and the round were the womb, the magnetic. And I've also heard they're like tuning forks. They're attuned to each one is like a note, and each church or cathedral has a rosette that plays a certain note. So the whole city's like a song. And then the spirals are the electrical that pull the energy from the ethers and then ground them in the crystals beneath it. Fascinating. And you know what? I'm so glad you said this because I've been wondering, because here where I am, we have well, not here, we don't have pyramids, but we have the, ancient temple with the columns, kind of like the Greek architecture. And then we also have, I mean, they do them in periods, but I think they all existed at the same time. We have the dome structures that you talked about, the cathedrals. And then when, of course, we have Egypt right across, or when I was in the Yucatan, the pyramids. But I think they all existed together in this beautiful symphony of actually the pyramids were like photovoltaic systems that drew the energy, and we're finding that out now with the new discovery in Egypt, and stored it. And then through the ley lines, it was distributed throughout to the cathedrals that in the city centers would resonate, the high frequencies, not only electricity, but maintain the whole planet on the organic timeline in alignment with the Christella spiral of life. And that was and that happened also through the toning and the organ notes playing. It was just something we knew. It was like you'd see this church, but it was our spiritual practice, and it was what the goddesses did in Malta too, in that underground, which I think you showed. I spent a lot of time in Malta and in the Hyperborean, which is where the underground resonating chambers of the oracles and the holier than holy, and that was the womb of the planet that kept the entire planet aligned. And that's what the goddesses did before the Knights Templar and the whole hijacking of the timelines. So fascinating. Okay, just real fast because we're running out of time, and we're going to pick this up and go into more detail, just casual discussion in part 2. So stay tuned. Next week we'll be talking about that. But how can people get a hold of you, Oliwia? So if they want to, do more with you,
you can reach me throughout my YouTube channel, Oliwia Ezayana, and that's where you can find all the details how to contact me. I'm assisting people with all sorts of different physical, energetic issues. And basically, this is not like me doing a healing facilitation on someone. I basically assisting people with finding out that they are their own healers through all sorts of different exercises that are supposed to help you work with your own internal energies towards the multidimensional realignment, because we are
I've
all
heard good.
healers.
I've heard good things about you.
Thank you.
Some people who have listened to the talk show and who have contacted you and then talked to me. So she comes highly recommended. All right.
Thank you.
So we've just got a few things to wrap up here, but I think what we should do is talk next week. We're just going to go more into detail about what you've covered and some of the fascinating, how we're getting it back, how we're coming back, in this
I think
ascension.
this is
How
definitely
is
something that needs to be discussed.
Yes, how's it coming back? How's the golden age returning, especially with all the amazing energy that's coming into our planet now? Thank you all for joining us. And if you need any, my website's www.infinitehuman.com. So everything's here. If you can't find it on my website and podcasts and YouTube's, but also please subscribe to whatever you're listening to so you are in tune with us for our next week's presentation. All right, so have a wonderful week, and we will say goodbye to you. I'm Elizabeth Monroy from infinitehuman.com, signing off. Ciao for now, and see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Infinite Human Talk Show with your host, Elizabeth Monroy. We hope today's episode has inspired you to join the new consciousness renaissance and be the change by reclaiming your true divine infinite nature within and becoming an infinite human and a co-creator of the new infinite earth. Tune in next week for another empowering episode. Until then, have an infinite week.